Good, good morning. You're welcome to our fifth topic of business research methods. Today we are handling literature review, which is a very important part of a research process. What is literature review? This is a critical analysis of published materials in a particular subject area. It helps in assessing literature, providing a summary, classifying literature according to issues, comparing arguments from different sources, evaluating their contribution to the body of knowledge. It is vital for any research project since one cannot look at all the original papers of interest. It is cost-effective and advantageous to rely on recent literature. And literature review helps to build the knowledge on the subject. The fact of the matter is that nobody can do research very well without consulting literature. So literature review is very, very important. It's the foundation upon which research is built. Whatever kind of research you want to undertake, you must make sure that you have reviewed literature to be able to see what the others have contributed before and what gap exists for you to fill. Very important. Relevance of literature review. It describes how the proposed research is related to prior research. It shows originality and relevance of your research. It justifies the proposed methodology. It demonstrates your preparedness to complete the research. So, methodology for when one clearly reviews literature, one is able to know what kind of methodology is appropriate for which kind of research. And when you read sources from professional experts, from experts in the area of research, you'll be able to emulate them even in the methodology they have used, be able to evaluate their work in that context, and you can be able to see the relationship between what you want to do and the methodology that the experts have adopted. Very important. Literature review also presents the theoretical core of any research project. Very important. Research without a theoretical core is no research at all. Theory is very, very important for any research. That's why if there is no theory at all, then you can do the inductive methods. But if there is a theory, it's advisable to do the deductive method, where you start from a theory and you go out in the field to test the applicability or relevance of that theory. So literature review is one of the ways you can present the theoretical core of your research. Look at what other researchers have done on the topic and provides the background to the study. And it serves as a motivation, the objectives, and the hypothesis. Right now, as we are working on our concept paper, this is very, very important. You may have found yourself getting stuck because you have not read any literature. Once you read the literature, you are able to find your way through this. A good literature review should critically evaluate, reorganize, and synthesize works of other researchers. Critically evaluate and digest the information from different sources and present your own conclusions in a concise, logical, and reader-friendly manner. What's the purpose of literature review? It defines the problem, and it defines the problem you're working on, and it gives limits to the coverage of the study. Your literature review will help you to define the boundary, the scope, the coverage. It places the study in historical perspective. You cannot be an island. You have to relate your study with those of others. And this is how you can be able to do that when you read the sources that have been written before. So it also identifies areas of prior research and also helps to avoid duplications. Why would you do the same study which has already been done? To avoid duplication, once you read literature, you can be able to find a gap where you can found your study, not to repeat people's studies verbatim. It helps to evaluate promising research methods. So, literature review also helps to relate your study results to previous knowledge. Very important. When you are discussing your research, you must discuss it in context. You must discuss your study in context of other studies. That's where you can be able to say, my study is similar to this one's study. My study is different from that one's study in this area. And why is it different? Because the methodology you have used is different, because the context you have used is different, because the population you have used is different, and because of the environment and other things. You can be able to relate why they are similar and why they are different. Very important. It helps to suggest further research, areas of further research. You cannot suggest areas of further research until you have done a critical analysis of the literature and you have found your niche, and then you can be able to suggest areas that you have not been able to cover, so that the people after you can also be able to cover those areas. So you should categorize your literature review into sources that support your arguments and sources that do not support your arguments. It's very important. And in that case, you have to discuss why are those sources supporting your arguments and why are those sources not able to support your arguments. That's very important. The topic and the audience. The topic and the audience. The topic should be of interest to you and should be of interest to the nation. You can't just pick a topic anyhow. The topic must be relevant. The topic must be of interest. The topic must, to some extent, solve a problem. You don't do research for the sake of it. So define the issues you want to address. Also define your audience. It's very important. Consider what you want to achieve by doing that research. And a good way to manage innovation in a particular context is to do literature review. When you do literature review, you are able to know areas that have not been treated, areas that have not been researched, so that you can provide insights or even treat into a new area in the form of innovation. Steps in the literature review. You have to define your subject. Very, very important. You have to define the scope of your review. You have to search literature. You have to read and evaluate the sources to determine whether they sufficiently contribute to your understanding of the issues at hand. If you are dealing with internal controls, you want to define what is the scope of internal controls. And then you go and look for literature. Who has written work on internal controls? You know, who has written work on internal controls? In which context? With which population? With which respondents? What were the results? And so on and so on. What were the variables studied? Which are the independent variables? Which are the dependent variables? And were there any mediators? Were there any moderators included in the variables? All those you can find out when you study literature. And then you have to determine whether they sufficiently contribute to your understanding of the issues at hand. You have to analyze and interpret and discuss the findings and conclusions of the sources you have selected. The more books and papers you review, the more relevant references you get for further review. How do you evaluate sources? You have to write the author's credentials. And also, the credentials of the authors determine the relevance of your work. If your authors are experts in the area, then you know that you are in good hands. If the authors are not known, then you begin to doubt whether this source is credible or not. But in your area, you should be able to know who are the experts, so that when you get materials from such experts, people who have made history in their profession, you can be sure that I am in the right hands, and that the materials reviewed from such sources are going to be very vital to help you to develop knowledge in that area. And so the argument should also be supported by empirical evidence, whether quantitative or qualitative. So empirical evidence is very, very important. What have the studies before you found out? So then, if you are going to do the study, what are you going to do differently? What are you going to do differently? And later you can be able to compare what you found out with what your predecessors have found out and see the similarities and differences. In that way, you make contribution to the source to better understand the subject. So after the review, and then you go into the field to collect data, and then analyzing your data and presenting your finding, you can be able to claim to have contributed to knowledge because you are building on a firm foundation. You should also be able to judge whether the sources that you are quoting are objective. And that's the maturity of a researcher. You should be able to know whether somebody is very subjective or somebody is very objective. But the methodology used will help you to evaluate the objectivity or subjectivity of a source you're quoting. If you find somebody who writes like it is hearsay, in Luganda we say Lugambo, you say, this source I'm not going to trust. I am not even going to refer to it because there is no evidence. So what about the interpretation part of the literature review? The summary of the current literature should contribute to your understanding of the problem. Design your research. The design of your research should reflect methodological implications of your literature review. And the review should provide rationale for your research. To stress the fact of research design, you can be sure of your research design if you have reviewed the literature of experts before you. That's when you can be sure that my research design is a valid research design. I can use it without doubt because the giants before me have used it, and the design has helped them to produce valid results. So you can pick a design from previous research, having seen how it has been used and how it has helped to direct the research question. Then you can also be able to borrow and modify and use it. Critical evaluation of literature review. Organize the materials according to issues. Have a logic in the organization of the materials. The amount of details on an issue should relate to its importance. Give critical analysis of the design and the methodological issues in the literature and indicate which results from different reports are conflicting and discuss possible reasons for the conflict. The point I want to stress here is that your literature review should be organized according to issues. If you are going to investigate particular variables, if you have 3 variables that you want to investigate, make sure your literature review is reviewed in the context of those 3 variables. Do not go outside the 3 variables you want to investigate. Look for materials that are in the area of the 3 variables. Of course, if you find other variables in other studies, you can say, okay, there are people who have investigated 4 other variables, 3 other variables, or 1 extra variable. But me, because of the strength of these variables and the relevance of these variables, I will stick to these 3 variables. And because my context is different from the previous studies, I would like to investigate how these 3 variables influence output, performance, and so on in my particular study. So, how do you select the sources? Cutoff in terms of dates of publication. If the materials are a flood, if you have a flood of materials, then you can say, I will review materials from 2010 to 2020. Those 10 years should be able to help me develop the direction of my study. You can even reduce it 2015 to 2020 if the materials are in plenty. That's the cutoff date for publication. But also, you need to know that, of course, the purpose of cutting on the new dates is that research keeps building on each other. So as you read these newer articles, they are also referring to previous articles and building on it. So it's like you found people who have built on something, and you're on the 4th floor and you want to pick it from there. As you read their articles, you are also, by implication, reading the articles that are before you, because if you trust the way they have reviewed their literature, you can be able to get a glimpse of the literature before you, even without reading it, by reading from current sources. So focus on primary sources, but also use secondary sources. The sources are scholarly journal articles, scholarly workshops, seminars, and conference papers, books, government publications, and websites. The list is long, but these are sources that you have to consult. Today, we are privileged to have the internet that can give us sources from wherever we are. We don't have to travel long distances to visit libraries. You can be able to access electronic sources, and those electronic sources are very, very vital for you, because you can be able to access sources from the United States, sources from the United Kingdom, sources from China, sources from Japan, sources from Malaysia, all over the world. You can access them by electronic sources. That is the beauty of the world of today. We can be able to access materials from wherever in the world where we are by a click of the mouse. How do you do the presentation of literature review? Try to review literature from the world perspective. How is it in the world there? Start with the developed world. How is it there? Then go to the developing world. How is it out there? Then move. This phenomena, how is it in Africa? You can start with North Africa, then you move to Sub-Saharan Africa, and then you come down to East Africa. Then you ask yourself, how is it there? How is it going? How is this phenomena experienced in North Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in East Africa? And then you slowly come down to Uganda, and then the particular region of Uganda, which you want to study in detail. So your literature review should move from broad base to a narrow base as you move towards your problem statement, as you move towards your conclusion. The review, during the review, you will discover what statistical knowledge exists in relation to your topic and increase your statistical knowledge in your research area. So find gaps and possible errors in earlier research. Even if you're weak in statistics, once you read people's materials that have been published, you are able to you can be able to add 1 and 2 if you study the way they have used statistics to present their findings. Some of the statistics are not very complicated. You should be able to follow. The best way to actually understand statistics is to read the application of statistics, how people have used statistics in the presentation of your results, of their results. That should be able to help you. Having understood that through reading literature, you can be able also to apply the statistical techniques that have been used, and you should be able to know how to interpret them and apply them. So generate new original ideas. Avoid duplicating results. Please do not duplicate results. Duplication of results is doing the same study that other people have done without changing anything, either context or population or changing variables or whatever you want to change. Avoid duplicating results. Justify the relevance of your proposed research. That is important. At proposal level, you have to justify. Right now, we are working on concept paper. Make sure that you justify why you have picked on this particular issue, why you want to study it, what variables you want to study, why you want to study it, why it is urgent, it has to be studied now, and so on. So that justification is very, very important. So literature review will help you to put your justification in perspective. The review should help you to convince yourself that your study will make a large contribution to the stock of knowledge. As you draw towards the end of your review, develop a well-conceptualized framework with precise definitions of variables and reveal the hypothesis to be tested. Take notes while reading books, articles, and papers. Include references because after sometimes you may not know the source of information you have noted on paper. Use quotation marks if you are quoting verbatim, but you may need to paraphrase or rephrase those in your own words. Choose the type of review you wish to write. Keep the review focused. Know that you are competing for space and make the review relevant to a broader audience. Now that you are writing a concept paper, you need a literature review. The reason why I've decided to teach this topic before population and sampling is that this is very, very important. You need to get this at the foundation before you move to population and sampling techniques. It's very, very important because literature review is the heart of any research project. Without it, if it is badly done, the research is not going to succeed. When it is properly done, the direction is guaranteed, the success is guaranteed, the future is guaranteed. So I encourage you to do literature review before you can prepare your concept paper. A good concept paper, a good proposal, will rely on a very good literature review. I hope this gives you an understanding of literature review and its importance, and I hope you'll use it for better in my country. Thank you.